I never knew a single typo would lead me into the arms of a monster, or that he would end up being the only person to ever truly see me. I was just a lonely nurse, starving for a simple human connection, when I texted the wrong number. I thought I was messaging my sister, but I accidentally reached the most feared man in the city. He should have ignored me. He should have blocked me. Instead, he did the craziest thing I've ever seen a man do. Stay with me for the next 3 hours, because what happened between us isn't just a romance. It's a fight for survival that will leave you breathless. Before we dive into this incredible journey, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. Amara stared at her empty fridge, her stomach growling and her heart aching from a year of total isolation in a cold New York apartment. She was a nurse who spent all day caring for others but had no one to hold her hand. With trembling fingers and tears blurring her vision, she typed a message intended for her sister back in Lagos. "I can't do this anymore. I'm so lonely it hurts. I just need your touch. Please come to me." She hit send, but the last digit of the phone number was wrong. She didn't know she had just messaged Lorenzo, the ghost Vane, a man who ran the city's underground and hadn't felt a human emotion in a decade. Lorenzo sat in the back of a black SUV, cleaning a silver pistol, when his burner phone buzzed. He expected a threat or a deal. Instead, he saw a raw cry for help. Something about the words, "I need your touch," pierced through his armor. He tracked the signal to a crumbling apartment building in a neighborhood his men usually avoided. Instead of deleting it, he found himself typing back. "Who is this?" Amara, thinking it was her sister's new number, replied, "It's Amara. Please, I'm at my breaking point." Lorenzo felt a strange pull. He told his driver to turn the car around. He wasn't going to the meeting. He was going to find the woman who sounded as hollow as he felt. When Lorenzo arrived at her door, he didn't look like a savior. He looked like a storm in a $5,000 suit. Amara opened the door, expecting her sister, but found a giant of a man with eyes like cold flint. She gasped, backing away, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You sent the text," he said, his voice like gravel. Amara realized her mistake instantly and began to apologize, her voice shaking. But Lorenzo didn't leave. He saw the way her hands trembled and the way her small apartment was filled with medical books and cheap ramen. He saw a soul that was starving, and for the first time in his life, he wanted to provide. The tension in the room was thick enough to taste. Lorenzo stepped inside, closing the door with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot. Amara should have been terrified. This man radiated danger, but she felt a strange warmth coming from him. He didn't touch her, but he stood close enough that she could feel the heat from his body. "You're hungry," he stated, not asking. He picked up his phone and made a single call. Within 20 minutes, 5-star meals were being delivered to her tiny kitchen by men who looked like they belonged in a war zone. Amara watched in silence, wondering if she had accidentally summoned a guardian angel or a demon. As she ate, Lorenzo sat across from her, watching her every move. He didn't eat. He just watched the color return to her face. He told her his name was Enzo, omitting the Mafia boss part of his resume. He found himself telling her things he'd never told his therapist about the weight of his crown and the silence of his mansion. Amara listened with a kindness that made his chest ache. She told him about moving from Nigeria with big dreams, only to find a city that didn't care if she lived or died. For the first time in years, the ghost felt like a man again. The night took a turn when a black sedan screeched to a halt outside. Lorenzo's eyes went sharp. He knew his enemies had followed him. He didn't want Amara to see the monster he truly was, but he had no choice. He grabbed her hand, the first time they touched, and the electricity was so strong it made Amara gasp. His hand was rough and scarred, but it felt like the safest place on earth. "Stay behind me," he whispered. He didn't use a gun. He used his presence to intimidate the scouts waiting outside, sending them fleeing into the night. He was protecting her, and she was the only thing keeping him human. By the end of the first hour, the bond was sealed. Lorenzo realized he couldn't just walk away and let her go back to being lonely. He looked at her and made a silent vow, No one would ever hurt her again, and she would never go hungry for food or for affection ever again. But as he looked at her, he saw the Mafia tattoo on the arm of a passing guard in the street, and he realized his world was too dark for her light. He told her he had to go, but he left her with a stack of cash and his personal number. Amara watched him leave, her heart heavier than before, not knowing she was now the target of every rival Lorenzo had. The second hour begins with Amara living a life she never dreamed of. Lorenzo had moved her into a high-rise penthouse for her safety. She had beautiful clothes and the best food, but she was still alone. Lorenzo visited her every night, but he refused to get too close. He was terrified that his darkness would rub off on her. They would sit on the balcony, looking over the city, talking for hours. The emotional addiction grew. Amara began to crave his arrival more than the luxury he provided. She realized she wasn't just touch-starved anymore, she was Enzo-starved. One evening, Amara decided to break the rules. When Lorenzo arrived, looking tired and bruised from a business meeting, she didn't stand across the room. She walked right up to him and reached out. Lorenzo flinched, his instincts telling him to strike, but he froze when her soft hand touched his cheek. The contrast was cinematic, her dark, smooth skin against his rugged, scarred face. He let out a breath he'd been holding for a lifetime. He leaned into her palm, and for a moment, the Mafia boss disappeared. He was just a man who needed to be loved. But the Mafia boss side couldn't stay hidden forever. A rival family, the Rossi clan, found out about Amara. They saw her as Lorenzo's only weakness. While Lorenzo was away dealing with a shipment, masked men broke into the penthouse. Amara used her nurse training to stay calm, hiding in a panic room Lorenzo had insisted on building. She watched through the security cameras as they trashed the place. She realized then that Enzo wasn't just a wealthy businessman. She saw the guns, the symbols, and the raw violence of his world. She was terrified, not just of the intruders, but of the man she was falling for. Lorenzo arrived like a whirlwind of fire. He didn't wait for his guards. He broke through the door himself. The craziest thing he did wasn't the fight, it was how he reacted when he found her. He didn't check his belongings or his money. He fell to his knees in front of the panic room door, begging her to open it, his voice breaking. When she stepped out, he wrapped his arms around her so tight she could barely breathe. He wept into her shoulder, a man who had never cried, terrified that his mistake had cost her life. Amara held him, realizing that his power meant nothing if he lost her. The twist comes when Amara finds a file Lorenzo dropped during the chaos. It wasn't about money or drugs. It was a file on her family in Nigeria. Lorenzo had been secretly sending money to her parents, paying off their debts, and setting up a clinic in her home village. He had been doing the craziest things to make her happy without ever taking credit. Amara was overwhelmed. She confronted him, asking why he would do all this for a girl who sent a wrong text. Lorenzo looked her in the eyes and said, "Because you are the first person to ask for me, not for what I could do for you." Despite the love, the danger was peaking. The Rossi family sent a message, "Give us the girl, or we burn the city." Lorenzo knew he had to make a choice. He couldn't keep her in a cage, even a golden one. He prepared a private jet to send her back to Nigeria, where she would be safe and wealthy for life. He told her it was over. He acted cold, pushing her away, trying to make her hate him so she would leave without looking back. It was the ultimate sacrifice. He was going to face his enemies alone, expecting to die, just to ensure she lived. The hour ends with Amara at the airport, her heart shattered. She had the money, the safety, and the touch she had craved, but it was all hollow without him. As she walked toward the gate, she saw a news report on the airport TV. A massive fire had broken out at Lorenzo's warehouse. He was trapped inside. Amara realized she didn't want a safe life. She wanted a life with him. She turned around and ran out of the airport, screaming for a taxi. She wasn't going back to Nigeria. She was going back into the fire for the man who had saved her soul. Amara arrived at the warehouse just as the sirens began to wail. The building was a skeleton of steel and flame. Lorenzo's men were standing back, thinking he was already gone. But Amara knew he was a fighter. She grabbed a heavy wet blanket from a nearby fire truck and, using her knowledge of emergency medicine and pure adrenaline, she ran toward the side entrance. The guards tried to stop her, but she moved with a desperation they couldn't match. She found Lorenzo pinned under a fallen beam, the smoke filling his lungs. He looked up and saw her, thinking he was already in heaven. "Why are you here?" he gasped as she worked to lift the pressure off his chest. "I sent you away." Amara didn't argue. She used a metal lever to shift the beam just enough to pull him out. They crawled through the heat and the dark, their hands locked together. This was the ultimate touch, not one of romance, but of survival. When they finally burst through the back doors into the cool night air, they both collapsed. The image of the Nigerian nurse saving the most feared man in New York became a legend in the underworld that very night. The aftermath was a turning point. Lorenzo realized that as long as he was the ghost, Amara would always be a target. He did the craziest thing a mafia boss could do. He called a meeting with all the heads of the families and surrendered his territory. He gave it all away, the docks, the clubs, the power. He traded a billion-dollar empire for a single life. The other bosses thought he was weak, but as he walked out of that meeting with Amara by his side, he felt like the strongest man alive. He was finally free from the chains of his father's legacy. They disappeared. For months, the city wondered where the ghost had gone. The story shifts to a small, sun-drenched town on the coast of Africa. Amara had opened her clinic, the Vein Medical Center. She spent her days healing people, just as she always wanted. But now, she wasn't lonely. Every evening, a tall man with silver-flecked hair and a calm expression walked through the doors to bring her lunch. Lorenzo had become the clinic's administrator, using his sharp mind for logistics and medicine instead of crime. The emotional payoff happens on a quiet evening by the ocean. They are sitting on the sand, the waves gently lapping at their feet. Amara looks at Lorenzo and thanks him for the mistake of that text message. Lorenzo smiles, a real, genuine smile that reaches his eyes. He tells her that he was the one who was truly starving, not for food or touch, but for a reason to be a good man. He shows her his hands. The scars are still there, but they don't hold guns anymore. They only hold hers. The final twist arrives when a young man approaches them on the beach. He looks nervous and holds out a phone. "I'm sorry," the boy says in English. "I think I have the wrong person, but I got a message from this number saying, 'Thank you for saving me.'" Lorenzo looks at the phone and realizes it's his old burner number, the one he thought he destroyed. It turns out, his old life was trying to reach out one last time, not with a threat, but with a message of gratitude from a life he'd spared years ago. The cycle of violence was truly broken. The story ends with a cinematic shot of the sun setting over the water. Amara leans her head on Lorenzo's shoulder, and he wraps his arm around her. They are no longer the starved lady and the mafia boss. They are just Amara and Enzo, two people who found a miracle in a wrong number. The screen fades to black with the sound of the ocean and the heartbeat of a love that defied every odd. Their journey proved that even in the darkest world, a single moment of vulnerability can change everything.